Hey guys, tonight we travel to the overcast hills of rural Georgia. Not the American one, but the stone hut goat-rich kingdom wedged between the Black Sea and the Caucasus Mountains. The air smells faintly of rain moss and something sour someone left in a barrel too long. You're standing in a village where roofs are held down by stones and gossip, and where everyone knows exactly who'll inherit the sheep, unless it changes last minute due to a poorly timed sneeze. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while we're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love knowing who else is up at strange hours, learning about inheritance feuds involving pickled turnips. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake to the soft sound of rustling wool, and two grandmothers arguing in Georgian from across a clay-walled courtyard. One of them is preparing bread, the other is sorting walnuts with unsettling intensity. You, dear listener, are the soon-to-be heir of something. You don't know what yet. Might be the family stool, might be the three-legged pig named Tamar II, but your time has come. Inheritance here is less legal document, more mood. Wills aren't written, they're muttered, usually at dusk, sometimes into soup. Your recently deceased Uncle Georgie may or may not have left you the barn, or the pickaxe, or nothing. It depends who you ask and how convincingly they squint at the floor while explaining. Soon a procession forms outside the hut. Not a dramatic one, just your cousin Luca holding a ceremonial bell that doesn't work, a bread loaf wrapped in wool and a large pig jaw mounted on a stick. This apparently is the ritual. You are told to stand very still while the pig jaw is pointed at you clockwise, then counterclockwise, then once more, just to be safe. Meanwhile, the village elder mumbles something that sounds like a toast, but could also be a warning. His beard contains breadcrumbs and tiny rumors. He taps his walking stick 3 times against a flat rock, signaling that the ritual has begun, or ended. It's unclear. Now comes the assigning of items. First up, the family cooking pot. You eye it hopefully. It's large, slightly dented, and may or may not contain the spirit of your great-aunt who once screamed at a potato. Your cousin Tamar receives it with deep reverence and a barely concealed smirk. You get the gourd ladle, which has a hole in it and a faint smell of vinegar. Historians still argue whether inheritance rituals in medieval Georgia followed a structured code or simply spiraled out of control with each passing winter. There's evidence of land passing down maternally, paternally, and in rare cases via chicken-related prophecy. What's certain is that the rituals were deeply symbolic and often involved props that doubled as cooking tools. You now watch as the village priest, who also runs the apiary, presents a small scroll. It's written in ancient script, possibly wine-stained, and references the rightful holder of the northern threshold and all goats who dwell therein. You think that might be you. A brief dispute breaks out between your mother and your uncle over the meaning of threshold. Does it refer to the front door, the entire porch, or the spot where the chicken usually lays its weird sideways eggs? Voices rise. The pig jaw is waved again for emphasis. Eventually a compromise is reached. You inherit the threshold between thresholds, which turns out to be a damp plank beneath the firewood stack. You nod solemnly. Then there's that one Uncle Gela who appears only at inheritance rituals. No one knows where he lives. He claims to be part of the mountain now. He always arrives barefoot with a long stick and a handful of beetles. His main role is to declare if the inheritance was honorable. He sniffs the air, snorts twice, and says nothing, which is somehow a yes. Next up, the family mirror, which has been cracked since Queen Tamar's reign and now shows only half a face at a time. It is presented to your sister as both a blessing and a mild threat. She accepts it with a curtsy and a visible shiver. As the morning deepens, the mood lightens. Someone passes bread around. You take a bite. It's dry, sour, and contains a small pebble, possibly intentional. The pig jaw is finally laid to rest atop the roof beams facing the sunrise as tradition dictates. The ceremony closes with a group nod. That's it. Just a synchronized, slow, respectful nod from everyone present. Your inheritance is sealed. You now own one corner of a stool, the eastern segment of a threshold, and half a fence you must share with a goose. And yet, you feel honored, grounded, slightly itchy, but that's unrelated. You rise the next morning with a sense of mild responsibility and 1 foot deeply embedded in goat droppings. The stool corner you inherited is still intact, though the goose seems less willing to negotiate the fence-sharing arrangement. You approach it with a dried apricot as is customary. The goose rejects your offering and bites your sleeve. A fair response. Today, your uncle, possibly named Rev, is possibly just called that by accident, has promised to teach you the deeper customs surrounding inheritance. He begins by leading you up a mountain path lined with lichen-covered stones and gossiping walnut trees. The path is slippery with morning mist and philosophical uncertainty. At the summit is a shrine, partly a rock, partly a shrine, entirely confusing. Ravaz lights a beeswax candle and explains that some families use this place to ask for inheritance dreams. Yes, actual dreams. You're supposed to nap here on the cold stone slab and hope a dead relative visits with financial advice. You lie down, you blink, you dream of sheep arguing over tax forms. Reva says it counts. Historians still argue whether such dream visions genuinely influenced medieval property division or if people just liked an excuse to nap outdoors. In your case, the vision apparently means you now own a 12% share of the West Orchard, provided the trees agree. They don't. One drops a walnut on your head in protest. Back in the village, preparations begin for the reckoning of the ledger, which sounds ominous, but mostly involves a wax tablet, some sheep bones, and a cousin with very bad handwriting. He records each item passed down, including ambiguously inherited objects like the lesser key and the barrel that used to be important. You're told you're responsible for 3 spoons, 1 ceremonial ladle non-functional, and a jug that only leaks when stared at directly. Meanwhile, the village blacksmith arrives with his opinion. No one asked for it, but he's here anyway, covered in soot and deeply invested in whether the Eastfield's inheritance should include the nettle patch. He says it shouldn't. The nettles disagree by stinging him in unison. You now undergo the ceremonial wearing of the belt that doesn't fit, which signifies your entrance into inheritance adulthood. The belt once belonged to your great-uncle Vachtang, who was twice your size and half your height. You wear it across one shoulder like a sash and try not to trip. A nearby child salutes you with a boiled egg. You salute back. As mid-morning passes, the village matriarchs gather on a flat stone to whisper and sort garlic. You are invited to sit exactly 2 stones away, not closer. You listen. They discuss who really owns the east-facing windowsill and whether dreams involving ducks should be legally binding. You say nothing. You are learning. There is a long-standing custom you discover called the test of practical stewardship. This involves maintaining the items you've inherited in full public view. You must oil the hinge on the half door. You must scrub the cobwebs from the inside of the jug. You must whisper compliments to the stool corner to keep it from wobbling. These tasks are done barefoot while a neighbor watches disapprovingly from a bench. Lunch is a shared affair, eaten on a communal stone table carved with the names of ancestors and one suspiciously detailed fish. You chew barley cakes while eyeing the inheritance of others, a breadboard engraved with stars, a bronze earring missing its twin, a rooster who answers to no one. You trade half a honey walnut for a glimpse at someone's goat comb. It's worth it. Now comes the parade. Yes, an inheritance parade. Very slow, mostly ceremonial. Everyone walks once around the village square with their inherited item in hand, or in the case of livestock and rope-based negotiation, you hold your threshold plank like a champion. A toddler carries a spoon larger than their head. The priest walks last, balancing a cracked chalice on a pillow. The parade ends with music, a mournful 3-stringed lute, and someone clapping on the wrong beat. A small dog howls in harmony. This is seen as an auspicious sign. You bow narrowly, missing a passing pigeon. Later, under the shade of a fig tree, you're asked to declare your intentions for your inheritance. You say you'll guard the threshold with honor, keep the stool corner polished, and share the fence equally with the goose pending further negotiations. The villagers nod solemnly. The goose does not. By now, evening mist begins to curl through the village alleys like soft fabric. Candles are lit. Fires are stoked and someone accidentally sits on the ceremonial ladle. You are invited to take part in the final inheritance meal, quiet supper where each dish corresponds to a family value: lentil stew for patience, pickled cabbage for memory, and a walnut cake that tastes like compromise. You chew slowly. It's oddly moving. As the stars rise, the elder approaches you again, this time with a blanket and a piece of charcoal. You are to write your own name on the inside of your hut's lintel beam. It's not legally binding, but it is emotionally definitive. You climb a wobbly stool, press the charcoal to wood, and leave your mark. The goose watches unimpressed. For now, the threshold is yours, and so is the jug. And the 3 spoons, though one is still missing. It'll turn up, probably in the thatch. The next morning arrives with the sound of rain on wool and a chicken yelling at nobody. You rise with the soft ache of someone who now owns land in theory and spoons in practice. Outside your hut, a neighbor greets you by solemnly handing over a clump of moss. For your threshold, he says. You nod, unsure if this is a gift, a warning, or just some damp encouragement. You begin your duties as an inheritor of rural Georgian miscellany by inspecting the threshold plank. It remains in place barely and now features a curious slug which is seen by passing villagers as either a sign of fortune or a reminder to sweep more often. You thank the slug. It does not acknowledge you. Your first test arrives before breakfast. A delegation of 3 grandmothers appears unannounced to inspect your threshold posture. This, it turns out, means how you stand near inherited wood. You attempt an angle that implies strength but flexibility. They nod. One of them offers you a pickled radish. Approval. Then comes the goose problem. The bird has claimed 2/3 of the shared fence and now sits atop your plank like it owns the deed. You attempt negotiation. It hisses. You back away. A child offers to mediate. You agree only to learn the child has no actual influence but enjoys watching adults get pecked. The goose remains undefeated. Later that day, you're summoned to the village's record of things people swear they own. It's carved into a long wooden beam in the community hall, using a series of gouges, burn marks, and walnut stains. Your name is added near the bottom alongside an ambiguous symbol that may mean threshold or goat. Either way, it's official. You now participate in the annual object maintenance circle. Everyone brings their inherited items for show and tell me if it's still legal. You hold up your jug, turn it slowly, and pour out exactly 1 drop of mystery fluid. The village nods approvingly. Someone claps. The priest sneezes. Suddenly, a challenge arises. Old Dotto, a distant cousin or possibly a retired cheese thief, claims your stool corner used to be his. He presents no evidence, only a dramatic limp and a twig he calls the witness. A tribunal is formed consisting of 1 mildly respected elder, the goose unofficial, and a local beekeeper who doesn't really care, but was already nearby. The trial lasts 9 minutes. Your defense includes 1, a poem you wrote about the stool, 2, a drawing of it. With your name in bold, and 3, a handful of barley, you drop for effect. The twig is declared inconclusive. You win, barely. To celebrate, the village holds a small ceremony involving flatbread walnut shells and a song no one remembers how to finish. You join in anyway. The goose hisses rhythmically. That evening, your cousin Tamar comes by to exchange family news and 1 moldy apricot for a turn with the ceremonial mirror. You agree partly out of generosity, partly because the mirror makes your nose look suspiciously noble. Tamar whispers that someone saw a fox sniffing your jug. This could mean anything. You nod solemnly. As twilight settles, you perform the rite of the reaffirmed threshold, which involves sweeping the plank, humming a family song, and briefly touching the lintel beam with a fishbone for luck. Tradition says this prevents the return of the threshold. Wobbles, a condition feared by peasants and stools alike. Inside your hut, a tiny feast is prepared, bread with fig paste, half a boiled egg, and a cube of cheese so aged it might vote. You eat slowly. Across the table, your cousin lights a tallow lamp and quietly arranges small objects in a pattern meant to encourage inheritance stability. The pattern is unclear. The intention is strong. The hut creaks gently with wind and familiarity. Someone outside plays a reed flute badly. A cow sneezes. The goose has claimed the thatch as its new headquarters. You accept this with the grace of someone learning to share with destiny. You lie down with the sense that everything threshold jug goose cosmic burden is exactly as it should be. The charcoal on the lintel smudges slightly in the damp, but your name remains. The night is long, the moss is dry, and you sleep knowing that tomorrow you may inherit more. Or less. But definitely something. You awake to the sound of light rain tapping on your roof, and one of the neighbors arguing with the chicken again. This is normal. You roll over carefully, hoping not to dislodge any of the semi-communal tools that sleep beside you. Now 2 scythes, a spool of thread, and a ceremonial walnut grinder you swore to guard last Thursday. Today is a market day. Not the kind with stalls and shouting merchants. This is a more local affair. It takes place on the flat rock behind the old mill, and the only currency is silent eye contact and whatever someone remembered to ferment. You pack your belongings, the jug, the threshold plank strapped to your back with twine and 3 dried pears. The goose follows uninvited. You do not resist this. Upon arrival at the market rock, you find 10 others already in place. They sit cross-legged around their own ancestral objects, carved spoons, fragments of prayer beads, one suspiciously musical onion. Everyone nods. Trade begins. Your jug is admired by a woman named Bella who smells faintly of vinegar and hope. She offers you a spindle in return, carved from apricot wood and etched with someone's initials or possibly instructions for a ritual bath. You consider. You counteroffer the jug and a half pear in exchange for the spindle and rights to her family rain song. She agrees. The song is only 4 notes. 2 are hummed. Your next trade is less successful. You attempt to exchange the threshold plank for a set of salt crystals arranged like a medieval chessboard. The owner, a man who insists his name is Uncle Bread, refuses, citing bad dream residue. You nod respectfully and walk away. As you sit back down to rethink your strategy, a hush falls over the market. Someone approaches wearing a faded tunic stitched with copper thread and carrying a wheel. Not a wheelbarrow, just a wheel. Unattached, clean, it gleams with unreasonable dignity. Whispers follow. He found it in the stream. It used to be part of the goat cart of St. Ericle. It spins in both directions. You squint. The wheel does in fact rotate politely when nudged. A trade ensues: 3 turnips, a smooth stone, and a promise to help roof a hut next spring. The wheel changes hands. History is made. You leave the market slightly lighter. The jug is gone. The spindle weighs more than expected. You hum the first 2 notes of your new rain song, and the sky responds by not raining harder. This is counted as success. Back home, your aunt stops by to inspect the energy of the hut, a ritual that involves sweeping in a spiral and staring into a pot of water until it bubbles or she sneezes. She does both. Then tells you the threshold beam needs more garlic knots. You comply, tying 2 cloves with yarn and tacking them under the plank. The goose, now clearly aware of its growing mythos, watches from the window ledge like an avian tax assessor. By afternoon, you decide to oil the hinges on the family chest. This turns into a 3-hour detour involving lost keys, a poem about hinges, and a short nap inside the chest itself for clarity, not comfort. When you emerge slightly wiser and covered in cedar shavings, you discover that your cousin has attempted to barter one of your pears for invisible yarn. The trade was not accepted, but it did inspire the weaver to consider invisible socks. This will likely become a movement. Dinner is chestnut stew and the sound of a neighbor teaching their child how to apologize to a chair. You nod along. It's a valuable skill. As the moon rises, your family gathers by the fire to retell the story of when the village nearly elected a duck as mayor. You laugh quietly at the part where the duck declined with dignity. Your grandfather swears it really happened. You believe him. Before bed, you hang the spindle above your door for luck and whistle the third note of the rain song. The wind shifts slightly. The stars blink at you with a kind of bored approval. You lie down beneath the threshold plank, which now doubles as a makeshift shelf. On it rest the cloves, the spindle, and a pebble shaped vaguely like a nose. These are your treasures now. You dream of wheels turning slowly in forgotten barns, of rain dripping onto sun-warmed rocks, and of bread that always sings in tune. Morning comes with the delicate creak of the thatch roof shifting in its sleep and the faint, inevitable scent of porridge starting to burn. You wake under your plank shelf, reach up to check on your spindle, and find that it has rotated exactly 1/4 turn during the night. Whether this is due to wind magic or mice remains unclear, but either way, you nod solemnly. Something has shifted. Today is special. Today, you will attempt to make a candle. It's not a feast day, nor a solstice, nor a goat naming ceremony, though one is scheduled next week. No, today just feels like a candle day. You fetch your supplies, a lump of old beeswax, a bit of twine you unpicked from your own sock, and a mold that previously housed a very unsuccessful carrot cake. The process is slow. You melt the wax in a clay pot balanced precariously over your hearth. It bubbles politely, releasing a scent that is equal parts honey soot and optimistic failure. You dip the twine again and again, building up layers with the patience of a minor saint. Your cousin offers to help, then immediately knocks over the pot. You rescue most of the wax with a spoon and a string of words that are only technically curses. By midday, you have created something resembling a candle, short, lumpy, and emitting the distinct energy of a creature that might speak if provoked. You light it anyway. The flame sputters once, then steadies into a tiny brave glow. Everyone applauds, even the goose honks appreciatively. Flushed with success, you set off to visit the edge of the forest where rumor claims an old woman lives who can read the future from potato skins. You don't plan to ask her anything important, just whether next Tuesday will involve rain geese or moral dilemmas. The forest path is soft with leaf mulch, and the sun filters through the branches like a lazy blessing. You carry your candle in a pouch wrapped in linen and hubris. Along the way, you pass a tree that smells like cider and hums when the wind hits it right. You leave it a small gift, half a crust of bread, and a rhyme you make up on the spot. The old woman does exist. Her hut leans like it's whispering to a moss-covered rock, and she greets you with the words, "You brought soup." You did not. She seems disappointed, but invites you in anyway. Inside, it's warm and chaotic. Herbs hang from every beam, and 3 cats glare at you from mismatched chairs. You sit on a stool made of broom handles and offer her a look at your candle. She squints, sniffs, and announces, "It's ambitious." She does not read potato skins after all. She reads cobwebs, but only the leftward ones. After a brief ritual involving a bell, a feather, and 1 sock yours, she tells you that tomorrow holds unexpected vegetables and the possibility of mild regret. You thank her and leave slightly lighter spiritually and sock-wise. On the way home, you stop by the village pond where the baker's apprentice is trying to teach a duck to nod on command. It works twice. Then the duck walks away with more dignity than anyone else here could manage. Back at the hut, preparations begin for tonight's storytelling circle. Everyone brings something: an old riddle, a newer lie, a tale passed down 3 generations, but now mostly about turnips. Your contribution is the candle. You set it on a flat stone in the center of the room and light it ceremoniously. It flickers, tilts slightly, and bravely burns. The stories begin. Your father recounts the time he outran a bee by sheer willpower. Your mother speaks of her cousin who claimed he could hear worms argue underground. A neighbor tells the story of how the moon once got stuck in a tree and a small boy freed it with a ladder made of shoes. You tell of the wheel at Market Rock, of the rain song, of the moment the goose made eye contact with a passing cloud and seemed to nod in understanding. The candle holds steady. Later, everyone drifts to their sleeping spots. You sit by the hearth chewing a crust of bread and listening to the last sputters of laughter fade into snores. The goose is already asleep, one foot tucked under, dreaming of minor municipal authority. You gently pinch out the candle, wrap it back in linen, and place it under your plank shelf, a treasure among treasures. The flame lingers in your vision, a soft glow against the dimming world. You crawl into your bedding, itchy and content limbs sore from nothing in particular. The hut creaks once in approval. The spindle does not move tonight. The rain song holds its notes. The world is quiet. And for now, that is enough. So now, you lie still, wrapped in the silence of a village that only half believes in time. The walls breathe softly. The goose does not snore, but it sighs occasionally like a very small bishop who forgot where he put his sermon. Outside, the wind nudges the thatch roof with gentle insistence like it's trying to remember a lullaby. The trees creak in reply. Somewhere a ladle has been left out and taps rhythmically against a barrel in the night. The moon is watching, of course. It always does. But it pretends not to. You shift slightly under your blanket, feeling the weight of the spindle in the rafters above the candle, nestled safe in its linen shroud, and the faint scent of bread that may or may not be sentient. This is how the days pass here, slowly, unimportantly, wonderfully. There will always be more mud to shovel, more wheels to admire, more invisible yarn to refuse with kindness. But for now, all of that can wait. There is nothing left to trade, no more saints to hallucinate, no errant codpieces to adjust. Hey guys, tonight, we drift into the faintly briny past where markets reeked of yesterday's catchfish, were considered holy, and no one had invented a reliable fridge. You're standing in the middle of a muddy medieval street. It smells like wet straw, smoldering firewood, and most prominently fish. There's no seagull in sight, but you hear one in your head anyway. A peddler waves a floppy pike in your face. It's slightly green around the edges. He swears it was caught this morning. He's lying. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I always love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past the stalls wondering why anyone would voluntarily buy this fish, and yet everyone does. Welcome to medieval Europe, where fish isn't just food, it's salvation. You eat it to cleanse your soul. You eat it because meat is banned on Fridays. You eat it because the church said so, and in this century, the church outranks your digestive system. Monks eat fish. Peasants eat fish. Kings pretend to enjoy fish while glaring silently at the cook. There are over 140 no-meat days on the liturgical calendar. That's 140 opportunities for cod to spoil quietly in a basket and take someone's dignity with it. But here's the problem. Europe is big. The coastline is far. And fish, as a general rule, hates travel. A salmon caught in the North Sea needs to reach a cathedral kitchen in central France before it starts muttering about retirement. That's a journey of hundreds of miles with no ice, no trains, no real hope. Some fish are packed in salt, others are smoked, many are just optimistically wrapped in cloth and prayed over. By the time they arrive, they smell like a confession booth in July. Still, the cooks do their best. They wipe, rinse, sprinkle with wine. They smile nervously at their lords and mutter something about aromatic qualities. You stare down at your trench of cold perch, unsure whether it's staring back. Fish isn't just food here, it's politics. Nobles flaunt exotic species. Foreign eels are a status symbol. Sturgeon is a royal monopoly. If your dinner table lacks at least one unfortunate sea creature, are you even truly noble? The church's influence only intensifies things. During Lent, even the suggestion of meat is scandalous. One bishop allegedly accused another of soup that smells like pork. No charges were filed, but reputations were deeply bruised. And so, Friday after Friday, cooks wrestle with the slippery logistics of holy dining. Freshwater lakes are overfished, rivers are guarded like treasure. And coastal towns develop entire fish economies, built on the nervous hope that no one notices the difference between fresh and slightly adventurous. Some clever households dig ponds known as stews to keep fish alive until needed. You peer into one, now it's murky, wriggling with carp and vaguely threatening. The fish don't know what day it is, but they do know they're doomed by Sunday. Historians still argue whether these ponds were practical or just medieval wishful thinking. A few records suggest they worked. Others describe stews so stagnant that fish tasted like old boots dipped in algae. Either way, it's better than buying a barrel of cod from that one merchant with the eye twitch. And speaking of barrels, welcome to your new worst friend. A salted barrel of herring is heavy, leaky, and extremely proud of its smell. Every village has one. Some towns build entire warehouses for the stuff, but once opened, the barrel starts ticking. You have about a week before it becomes a biological warning sign. Still, compared to meat, fish is cleaner, more pious, less sinful. Never mind that the last person who ate that mackerel started speaking Latin backward and hasn't been seen since. At a quiet monastery, a novice monk ladles out his portion of stewed eel. It jiggles unnaturally. He eats it anyway. No one complains. The abbot nods approvingly. Holiness is hard and frankly bland. One abbey develops a rotating fish menu, boiled on Mondays, pickled on Tuesdays, raw on fast days, and absolutely mysterious on holidays. There's one entry that simply reads gray soup. Scholars still debate what it was. The consensus is not fish, but also not fish. Some cooks try innovation. They crush herbs into paste and rub it over trout. They glaze carp with honey and ash. One daring Flemish recipe involves wrapping tench in crushed rose petals and baking it in mud. It fails spectacularly. The mud holds, the petals do not, and the entire dish is quietly buried under an apple tree. You, the tired kitchen assistant, are handed a slippery knife and a wriggling catfish. The cook gestures vaguely toward a cauldron. You're not sure whether to kill it, kiss it, or ask it to leave. Eventually, the catfish escapes. No one blames you. The kitchen smells like time and despair. A bell rings for dinner. Somewhere, a nobleman lifts his spoon, eyes the yellowing pike on his plate, and says, "Ah, yes, the divine aroma of penance." You're back in the kitchen now. Sleeves rolled up, your hands reeking faintly of brine and regret. Around you, it's chaos, but the slow, sleepy kind. Clay pots clink. Steam drifts from a cracked cauldron. A boy is weeping silently into a bag of onions. The cook claps you on the back and mutters, "Time to salt the eels," as if that's a normal sentence. Preserving fish in the medieval world is less science, more superstition wrapped in desperation. They tried everything. Salt, of course. So much salt, mountains of it. Salt was currency lifeblood, the difference between a tench and a biohazard. But good salt, dry, fine, pure, was expensive. So sometimes they used the damp gray stuff that clumped like cake mix and smelled faintly of old socks. You dump a heap into a barrel of herring, layering them like a fishy lasagna. The cook tells you to stomp on the lid so it fits. You do. The barrel moans. Somewhere in the abbey garden, a crow takes flight. Vinegar's next. Not fancy balsamic. This is rough homemade throat-clenching vinegar that could melt a spoon if left unattended. It was used to pickle anything remotely edible: fish, turnips, even suspiciously firm cheese. You watch as the cook pours a jug over some perch and seals the crock with beeswax. He whispers a short prayer, possibly to St. Jude, the patron of lost causes. Then there's the dried stuff. Oh, the dried stuff. Cod flayed and flattened into something resembling hardened laundry. It's called stockfish. You're told it keeps for months. It also tastes like driftwood dipped in glue. Rehydrating it takes 3 days, a hammer, and a lot of screaming. Still, it was better than nothing, maybe. Some regions buried fish in pits lined with snow. The problem, Snow doesn't always stick around, and if your snow pit was just a damp hole full of dreams and rotting trout, well, better luck next Lent. A few noble houses experimented with cold rooms. These were just shaded corners with thick walls and buckets of hope. Occasionally, they'd store fish in clay pots sealed with lard. This worked sort of unless the lard turned rancid, which it often did. Medieval Scandinavians were particularly inventive. They made something called rakfisk trout salted, then fermented in barrels for months. The result is a soft, tangy, almost fizzy fish that modern diners either love, fear, or consider a hazing ritual. Historians still argue whether rakfisk was eaten out of tradition or just to frighten invading Danes. One monastery in Bohemia reportedly stored carp in wine. It didn't work, but it made confession more interesting. Then there's fermentation. Not deliberate fermentation, accidental fermentation. You know, the kind that happens when you forget a bucket of sardines in the cellar and a week later it's become a sentient sauce. Some brave cooks embrace this. They'd skim off the top layer, mash it into a paste and call it garum, even though Roman garum had gone extinct centuries earlier. Close enough, they'd say, and quickly leave the room. You open a clay jar marked only with a fish-shaped symbol. Inside is something. It wobbles. The smell hits you like an apology in Latin. The cook nods, approving. That's the good batch, he says. You doubt it. One fringe method involved smoking fish. Long, slow burns over damp wood. Birch, alder, and oak were popular. The goal was not so much flavor as survival. A well-smoked haddock could last weeks. Unfortunately, most kitchens had no chimneys. So your eyes burn, your lungs protest, and every dish tastes faintly like barn fire. There's also a charming Icelandic belief that certain fish could be dried on rooftops during high summer and stored under beds for winter. This did work, assuming the cats didn't get there first, or the children, or gravity. But the weirdest trick you see today happens just before dinner. A cook takes a basket of river eels, sprinkles them with ashes, and tucks them gently into a pile of moss. Keeps them cool, he says, and calm. The eels do not look calm. One is plotting something. You meanwhile are tasked with brushing a pike with rosewater. It's meant to refresh the spirit. The pike is already quite dead. Still, you dab away, and the kitchen smells briefly like a wedding gone wrong. Dinner is announced by a bell that sounds like it's underwater. The Lord's table is set. 7 courses, 5 of them involving fish in some form or disguise. There's mock goose made of herring and breadcrumbs, fish sausage filled with minced carp, a jelly molded around a single shrimp, and a pie that looks promising until you slice it and discover it's full of anchovies and despair. You take a moment to breathe. Your hands are coated in oil herbs and something sticky that might be mustard or memory. The cook leans on the counter beside you. Better than last week, he says. At least no one passed out this time. Historians still argue whether medieval cooks genuinely believed these methods worked, or if they were simply performing hope in edible form. Records show pride in preservation. They also show a lot of people writing wills after dinner. But you have to admire the effort. No refrigeration, no preservatives, no real science, just barrels brine and a sense of divine obligation. They didn't always succeed. Honestly, they rarely did. But they kept trying day after day, eel after eel. You turn to the fire toss in a handful of bay leaves and pretend it matters. Somewhere outside, a fishmonger packs tomorrow's delivery in salt and song. You sigh. He's early. You're walking now, trudging toward what passes for refrigeration in the 13th century, the ice house. It's not as majestic as it sounds. More like a lopsided stone igloo half sunk in a forest glade, its door draped with a crooked wooden plank. You duck inside, and the first thing you notice is that it's not cold. Coolish, maybe. Slightly chilly if you squint. But not the bone-deep comforting cold of modern freezers. This is more cellar in early spring than ice fortress of solitude. Still, it's better than a moss pile. Inside, blocks of winter ice are layered with straw, thick, scratchy, and suspiciously damp. The idea is simple trap. The the last gasp of winter, and stretch it as far as humanly possible into the warm seasons. The reality: most of the ice melts by midsummer. You get maybe a few solid weeks of genuinely useful chill. After that, it's just wet hay and wishful thinking. You reach into a crate marked "Eel, do not poke," and immediately regret it. The fish is alive. That's the good news. The bad news is that it bites. Eels were weirdly reliable for medieval storage. Their snake-like build made them hardy, and they could survive for days in barrels of damp moss or even wine-soaked rags. Some cooks joked that eels were more durable than the servants who had to clean them. Others weren't joking. You hear the cook behind you talking about the old snow pits. Before there were ice houses, people dug huge holes, lined them with peat or stone, and packed them with snow collected during winter. Servants would shovel snow from mountaintops, haul it down in baskets or on sleds, and tamp it down into these chilly cellars. It was back-breaking work, and often futile. Warm spring rain had a way of undoing a month's labor in one afternoon. Historians still argue whether this seasonal snow collection was widespread or just an aristocratic quirk. Some chronicles rave about vast quantities of preserved ice. Others quietly change the subject. You help hoist a sealed clay jar out of a shallow pit. It's been buried in straw for 3 weeks. The label is faded, but someone has carved a tiny fish on the side along with a worried face. You crack it open. The contents resemble pudding made of despair. The smell confirms it. The cook shrugs. Could be worse. Could be last year's batch. At least one town tried storing fish in churches assuming the cold stone would help. It didn't, but it gave rise to a brief scandal when a bishop found a trout tucked behind the altar during Lent. There were sermons. Others tried placing fish under floorboards or in attic corners. A few even suspended them in wells tied to ropes so they wouldn't drift too far. You imagine pulling up a bucket hoping for water and being greeted instead by a limp, mildly surprised haddock. A rare luxury in wealthier households was imported snow. Yes, really. In parts of Italy and southern France, rich families hired teams to fetch snow from distant hills and pack it in insulated wagons, a medieval snow delivery service. Imagine waiting for DoorDash, but it's a guy with a donkey and 2 soggy baskets, hoping the sun doesn't betray him. In warmer regions like Moorish Spain, preserving fish meant getting creative. They often used citrus olive oil or pressed herbs to slow decay. A record from Granada mentions a fish paste mixed with pomegranate and vinegar stored in ceramic pots beneath shaded tiles. No one mentions whether it tasted good, but apparently it didn't kill anyone. Up north, some towns turned to peat bogs. Yes, bogs. The natural acidity and cool temperatures helped slow decay. A few enterprising villagers lowered fish into sacks and buried them in marshes for later retrieval. You wonder if they ever found them again, or if the bog simply made other plans. Back at the estate, the cook's newest idea involves stuffing a carp with cold porridge and placing it on a marble slab near the cellar door. He says it's experimental. You say it's potentially haunting. Still, the fish looks peaceful, almost meditative. You glance over at the servant chopping ice with a hammer. He's humming softly. The rhythm is oddly soothing. In the corner, someone is fanning a trout. You decide not to ask. One of the more absurd preservation theories comes from a traveling apothecary. He claims fish can be kept fresh by suspending them above bowls of vinegar mixed with rosemary and owl feathers. There's no evidence this works, but one kitchen tried it for a month before giving up and using the feathers to tickle the steward when he fell asleep. Modern historians find some of these methods baffling. Were they serious, satirical, desperate? Probably all three. But for every failed snow pit or vinegar shrine, there were moments that worked, moments when a salted carp lasted long enough to make it to the feast, when the eel didn't escape, when the trout actually smelled like fish instead of punishment. You sit down on a barrel tired. Your fingers are stained with brine and soot. The air smells like garlic and whatever passed for lemon back then. Outside, the sky darkens. Somewhere another cook prepares to gamble with another shipment of not quite dead cod. And inside this lopsided ice house, you wonder how long any of this will last before someone sneezes and everything starts melting again. The kitchen is glowing now, lit by firelight and the dull shimmer of pewter platters. You wipe your hands on your apron, eyeing the suspiciously glassy-eyed bream that's about to be the centerpiece of tonight's royal feast. It's a gamble. The fish looks fine, smells almost fine, but under the wrong candlelight it might reveal its true age. And then you're in trouble. You already know the stakes. This isn't just supper, this is spectacle. Nobles don't merely eat, they perform eating. Forks haven't caught on yet, so there's a lot of finger work, a lot of napkins, and a terrifying amount of eye contact. The fish has to be flawless, or more accurately, the illusion of flawlessness must be so convincing that no one says anything, not even if their trout winks at them. You help carry the dishes out slowly, reverently, like you're bearing relics to an altar. The great hall hushes. Minstrels pause, mid-tune. The first dish is placed a towering swan made of pastry stuffed with perch and painted gold. It gleams. It smells faintly of cinnamon and panic. The Lord leans forward. He lifts a slice. He chews. He pauses. And then mercifully he nods. The hall breathes again. Feasts are where preservation failure becomes art. If the fish can't be fresh, it must be disguised. So you douse it in almond milk, crust it in herbs, or cover it in what is generously called sauce. Some sauces are so thick they double as glue. Others contain more spice than sense cloves, nutmeg, mustard seed, ginger pepper, all dumped in as if trying to frighten the rot away. Historians still argue whether these spicy concoctions were genuinely meant to enhance flavor or merely overwhelm the nose. A few argue for the former. Most suspect the latter. One scholar dryly called it the cuisine of desperation, but with flair. One dish tonight is faux lamprey, a congealed eel substitute shaped like a lamprey and covered in a glaze of honey and wine. It's sweet, sticky, and aggressively unconvincing, but it moves well on the platter, and that's what matters. The guests eat with theatrical enthusiasm. No one comments on the carp that collapses mid-cut. Everyone laughs when the pickled herring is accidentally flung across the table by a duke with poor knife technique. A monk discreetly pockets a shrimp, possibly for study, possibly for later. You refill goblets. The wine flows. The laughter grows louder. The fish, if not quite fresh, is at least funny, which is a kind of success. But behind the scenes, the consequences are already brewing. You know the signs: the steward suddenly pale, the kitchen boy blinking too much, a quiet burp from the jester. These are omens. The feast may be lively now, but give it an hour, maybe two, and you'll hear the shuffle of soft sandals across the rushes, someone looking for a discreet bucket. There are records, quiet ones, of entire banquets ending in hushed chaos, noblewomen retreating behind curtains, monks mumbling prayers between hiccups. One chronicler simply wrote, "The pike was devout but unkind." Some cooks, fearing repercussions, began pre-tasting dishes, nibbling bits in secret before serving. If they survived the hour, the dish was declared fit. If not, well, the next cook got promoted. And yet with all this risk, people kept hosting feasts. Why? Because the show must go on. A rotten fish may threaten the body, but a dull banquet wounds the soul. So you smile, you serve, and you hope. To maintain appearances, kitchens developed elaborate tricks: hollow pies with steam vents, dishes surrounded by aromatic herbs, not for taste, but for masking. In one case, a fish was served inside a hollowed-out loaf of bread filled with rose petals. The scent was exquisite. The fish was not. Tonight's trick involves candles scented with juniper placed near the serving platters. They're meant to distract. One nobleman comments on the lovely smell of the hall. You do not tell him it's covering up a trout that's been refreshing since Wednesday. At one point, a servant sets down a bowl of stewed tench, then promptly trips and spills half of it into a noblewoman's lap. She screams. The fish flops out with a plop that echoes. The moment hangs. Then, mercifully, someone starts clapping. A toast is raised to the slipperiest stew in Sussex, and the feast lurches forward. You exhale. Crisis averted. Mostly. Somewhere in the corner, an elderly scribe is recording everything. He writes by candlelight, sipping wine, occasionally pausing to sniff his plate. He's seen worse, much worse. He once documented a feast where all the fish was raw on purpose, a fashion borrowed from travelers. It didn't end well. You begin clearing plates. The bones are clean, the sauces licked thin. People are full, possibly even content. You carry the remains back to the kitchen where the cook is already preparing for tomorrow. A new shipment is due in the morning, river trout and eels from the south. You both know they won't arrive fresh. But maybe, just maybe, they'll arrive in a condition that can be gently lied about. And that's enough. The kitchen is quiet now, just the last few embers glowing in the hearth, and the occasional sigh of a cook whose knees no longer work like they used to. You're scrubbing the last of the sauce from a pewter plate, listening to the low hum of someone whittling a spoon in the corner. It's peaceful in that end-of-the-world sort of way. And you can smell it faintly beneath the lavender and smoke the unmistakable sour tang of tomorrow's problem fish. It's been a long day of masking, marinating, and, if we're honest, mostly praying. But tomorrow brings more deliveries, and with them more spoiled trout to disguise and defend. And how will they do it? With spices. So many spices. A spice chest in a medieval kitchen is less about flavor and more about damage control. Cloves, cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, long pepper. It's a glamorous lineup until you realize they're not here to enhance the fish. They're here to fight it. You crack open the chest now. The scent rises like a gentle punch to the nose, sweet, spicy, mysterious. You sprinkle cloves over a slab of suspicious carp and pat it down like you're putting a toddler to bed. The fish stares up blank and compliant. Spices were a form of culinary theater. The more you used, the richer you appeared, which made them perfect for covering up less than ideal ingredients. If your fish was past its prime, a generous handful of galangal could fool even the most skeptical nobleman, or at least get him tipsy before he noticed. And almond milk. Don't forget almond milk. That smooth beige miracle poured over everything from porridge to pike. It didn't keep the fish fresh, but it made it look loved. Sometimes you'd mash dried fruit into a paste, spread it over a questionable fillet, and call it Mediterranean. No one questioned you. Not because they believed it, but because if they acknowledged the fish was bad, they'd have to stop eating it, and that would ruin the party. Historians still argue whether medieval diners were truly fooled, or if they simply chose to believe the illusion. One popular theory suggests that dining was a form of polite denial. As long as no one made a face, the fish was fine. And if someone did, they were probably French, and no one trusted the French palate anyway. Meanwhile, monks recorded their complaints in low, passive-aggressive Latin. The flesh was yielding, and the scent did linger. Translation. The cod was revolting, and now my robe smells like it. In one particularly spicy scandal, a cook was dismissed for over-peppering a pike to the point of eye-watering aggression. The Lord claimed he wept not from taste, but from betrayal. The cook was later seen selling honeyed trout in the market, shouting, "Now with 40% less pepper." You try a spoonful of stew, now thick, murky, aggressively gingery. Is it good? Hard to say. But it's warm, filling, and slightly numbs your tongue. You decide that's enough. In Moorish Andalusia, cooks had entire manuals devoted to the art of perfumed fish. These included instructions on how to layer saffron, rosewater, and vinegar to create a bouquet so strong guests wouldn't dare sniff beneath it. Some of these dishes were so floral they reportedly attracted bees during service. You glance at your own stew pot. No bees. A good sign. Elsewhere in Europe, households resorted to pure trickery. They served illusion dishes, carefully sculpted foods that looked like one thing but were actually another. A fish that was really pastry. A pastry that was really mashed beans. A mashed bean that, honestly, just wanted to be left alone. And the lies extended beyond taste. You've heard of cooks claiming the fish was caught just this morning despite its eyes suggesting it saw the fall of Constantinople. Others insisted it was a rare imported delicacy, even as the fishmonger from 2 streets over waved from outside. But no one contradicted them. To do so would break the spell. As a cook, you walk a fine line between culinary artistry and historical fan fiction. Your job isn't just to make food edible, it's to make it unforgettable, or at least unregrettable. You ladle out a final bowl for the steward and watch as he takes a cautious bite. He chews slowly, nods, and says nothing. You smile. That in this world is the highest praise. Somewhere outside, the bell tolls midnight. A lone kitchen boy snores under the table. The fish you couldn't save is already in a compost trench, gently returning to nature with all the dignity of a failed prayer. Tomorrow more will arrive, stiff, salted, anxious, and you'll start again with your spices, your sauces, and your quiet optimism that this one might not smell like abandonment. Because in the end, cooking in the Middle Ages wasn't just about food. It was about faith. Faith in barrels, faith in snow, faith that if you stirred the almond milk just right, no one would notice the fish was whispering. Hey guys, tonight we trudge through ankle-high morning fog into a field that smells faintly of damp oats, wet leather, and the unspoken anxiety of page boys who overslept. It's still dark out, just that soft gray hour when birds debate whether to bother singing. You're already cold and someone's misplaced your left glove. Around you, the camp is beginning to stir in slow motion, not with shouting or war horns, but with the careful rustle of canvas, the low snort of horses chewing hay, and curiously the crisp snap of linen being folded. This, as you'll come to learn, is the first real task of battle preparation, folding the banners, not sharpening swords, not loading carts, folding neatly, sometimes twice, occasionally thrice depending on the region, the rank of the standard bearer, and whether or not the banner includes embroidered ducks. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're feeling cozy, drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where you're all listening from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just behind the cook tent, which smells like regret and salted cabbage, watching three squires hunch over a bundle of folded cloth. One of them is arguing gently, sleepily, that the banner should be creased lengthwise first, because that's what Sir Edric always does. Another insists it's widthwise. The third just wants breakfast. What they're folding isn't just cloth, it's identity, it's the battle plan, it's regional allegiance, family pride, and in at least one case, a very large stitched goose meant to intimidate the enemy. Banners in the medieval world were serious business. They showed everyone who was in charge where to stand, and most importantly, where the wine cart usually parked. You're handed a piece of thick, slightly damp wool. It's your turn. This one's for a minor baron with a fondness for hunting dogs and checkered patterns. You try to fold it as you've seen them do, edges aligned, no creases over the emblem. But wool is a stubborn thing, and this particular standard insists on flopping to the left like a tired fish. The squire next to you sighs, loudly. The actual designs vary. Some are noble and fearsome lions, towers, suns with mildly angry faces. Others are more interpretive, a three-legged squirrel, a green fish on a purple background. One banner belonging to the Order of the Perpetual Pike is just a very detailed eel wearing a crown. Historians still argue whether this was symbolic, satirical, or just a poor embroidery decision. Each banner must be folded in a particular way, not only to preserve the fabric, but also to ensure it unfurls dramatically when hoisted. A limp banner is not only embarrassing, but potentially dangerous. There's at least one recorded case during the Battle of Brenwick where a soggy, tangled flag caused an entire flank to charge in the wrong direction. They stormed a cabbage field and captured a bewildered monk. This is why before dawn, before any horn sound or armor is strapped on the banners or folded, it sets the tone, it reassures the soldiers, it gives the illusion that someone somewhere knows what they're doing. As you wrap a long golden tassel around your completed fold, You hear the gentle clink of spurs behind you. A knight nods. "That'll do," he says not unkindly, though it's unclear whether he means the fold or the day ahead. Nearby, a boy no older than 12 struggles with a flag twice his height. It billows in the wind like a lazy ghost. His tutor, an older man with an expression like overcooked bread, corrects him without looking. "No creases across the boar's snout, lad. That's how the Duke lost Wiltfordshire." You pause. You weren't aware Wiltfordshire could be lost over snout creases, but this is medieval warfare. Anything's possible. There's a strong tradition of cause and effect here, being separated by superstition, miscommunication, and at least one goose. Some soldiers are too superstitious to touch banners at all. They believe only certain hands, usually the most calloused and sleep-deprived, should handle the cloth. One man you pass whispers a prayer to each fold. Another spits over his shoulder before every crease. You try both, just in case. As the light begins to stretch across the fields and the dew gives way to honest mud, the folding ends. Banners are tucked under arms, hoisted onto poles, and carefully leaned against wagons. Some are covered with linen wraps to protect them from soot. Others are left bare, meant to soak in the day, or perhaps to intimidate rival standards nearby. You're told not to let them touch. Once at a tournament in Alsace, 2 opposing banners brushed in the wind and started a 3-week feud that ended with a goat being knighted. You're not sure how much of that story is true, but everyone tells it. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows, probably late. A trumpet blares half-heartedly. Your stomach grumbles. The folding is done, but the battle hasn't even begun. And somehow, you already need a nap. Inside the main command tent, the air is thick with incense and wool dust. The tent's ceiling sags just enough to make taller knights stoop, and someone has left a damp fur cloak on a map of the western ridges. No one moves it. You're handed a steaming cup of something likely a mix of mint barley water and resigned disappointment, and motioned to kneel by a long oak chest. This is where the banner geometry begins. The folding process out in the field was just the warm-up. What you're doing now is ceremonial, technical, the sacred geometry of banners. These aren't just war rags, these are visual ciphers, signposts for armies, prayer cloths for anxious nobles, and in one unfortunate case, a canvas for a knight's deeply misunderstood attempt at a flamingo. Spread across the tent floor is a long linen banner belonging to House de Marnay, whose symbol, a stoic chicken standing atop a sun, must always face north during folds. No one knows why. Probably because the original banner folding guide was lost in a fire, or possibly repurposed into mittens. Historians still debate whether the north-facing chicken clause was a military code or a bored scribe's prank. You're handed a set of folding tools. They look like utensils. One resembles a pie server, another looks suspiciously like a shoehorn. These are the measuring paddles of the bannermaster, meant to create perfectly symmetrical folds without creasing the sacred crest. You are not trusted with them yet. Instead, you observe as 2 banner clerks, not knights, not squires, but actual clerks, work with the focus of chess masters. Every fold is measured. Every tuck is accompanied by a nod of silent approval. There's an assistant whose sole job is to hold the candle at a flattering angle. You envy him. He looks warm. The banner is folded first in half, then in thirds, then unfolded again. Apparently, someone folded over the sun chicken's left foot, which in de Marnay tradition signifies military retreat. This would be a diplomatic disaster if displayed at tomorrow's engagement. One of the clerks quietly coughs and starts over. You're pulled aside by an older man who introduces himself only as Albert, then launches into a hushed explanation of the tuck. You nod respectfully, though you understand very little. The tuck, he says, is the final inward curl of the banner's edge, meant to hold energy. His words, energy, not just neatness. If the edge is limp, he whispers, so is morale. You're not sure how folds and morale are connected, but someone nods solemnly in agreement. So you nod too. That's how it works in this tent. On the far table, you notice a smaller banner, a crimson square with a golden snail embossed at its center. It's being folded by a one-eyed woman named Lettuce, who hums to herself as she works. The snail, she explains, represents patience, perseverance, and the family's strategic preference for not moving unless absolutely necessary. You like this family already. Nearby, someone sneezes onto a flag. There is silence. A second sneeze, then an apology and a hurried wipe with a velvet glove. Folding resumes slightly tenser than before. One of the younger scribes is documenting each fold in a ledger. Each banner's condition, the precise fold style, and the name of the person who performed it are all noted. This is not overkill, it's protection. If a banner collapses mid-battle, someone needs to be blamed. The record-keeping ensures that blame can be assigned quickly, usually to someone who's conveniently not present. You're offered your first solo fold, a modest standard belonging to a lesser-known order from the eastern frontier, the Brotherhood of the Crooked Bell. Their sigil, a lopsided church bell with moss growing from it, must not be creased across the clapper. The clapper, you're told, represents divine judgment. You pause. The fabric feels oddly warm, possibly from the candle, possibly from years of anxiety. You fold carefully, following the crease lines laid out in chalk. As you reach for the corner, Albert steps in and redirects your hand slightly. "Breathe with it," he says, as if the banner is a cat you're trying to coax out from under a bed. You breathe with it. You fold. It's decent, not divine, but passable. The candleboy nods once. As the folding nears completion, the tension lifts slightly. Someone produces a plate of slightly charred oatcakes. They're passed around and taste like history, dry, brittle, and in dire need of fruit. You look around the tent, now dim with late morning light, and see a tapestry of folded banners stacked in quiet rows. Some are wrapped in protective cloth. Others are left uncovered, resting like noble pets waiting for orders. There's a kind of calm here, a reverence. You realize these banners, when unfolded, will speak on behalf of every man in this tent. And it all depends on the folds. Back outside, the weather has turned the color of boiled turnips an uninspiring gray that makes everything look a bit more tired than it already is. The banners are lined up now, quietly waiting, or posturing, depending on who you ask. This is the hour when nothing happens on the battlefield, but everyone's already nervous. You stand awkwardly beside a small wagon cart, pretending not to notice two knights in matching shoulder plumes, arguing softly but intensely over a folded banner with a red fox stitched into its corner. The folds, as it turns out, are wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. No one's going to lose a province over it, but insultingly wrong enough that one knight's squire has stopped making eye contact with anyone. Welcome to the world of banner feuds. There's a strange etiquette here, like ballroom dancing with wool in honor. If a banner is folded in a way that obscures or distorts a noble symbol, say, if a lion's tail gets bent downward instead of upward, that can be read as a gesture of insult. To fold a hawk's wing over its own beak, disrespect. Fold a serpent so its head peeks out from under its own body, blasphemy, depending on the region. What makes it worse is that many of these interpretations are entirely unspoken, unwritten, and often made up on the spot by whomever happens to be offended. Historians still argue whether the infamous banner incident at the 1361 Feast of Shields was a deliberate provocation, or just the result of damp linen and poor lighting. Today's squabble is between the House of Alderbrook, whose sigil is the fox, and the minor, but extremely prideful House of Dorne, whose own banner unfortunately also features a fox. A different fox, they insist, narrower snout, bushier tail. You squint at both. They look identical. You wisely say nothing. The argument continues. One knight insists the crease across the fox's back implies subservience. The other counters that the angle of the fold is actually a blessing. A third person brings over a traveling herald to arbitrate. The herald takes one look, declares the fold provocatively ambiguous, and wanders off in search of wine. You back away slowly and join a group of standard bearers by the edge of the encampment. They're sorting banners by pole length, a practice that has more to do with prestige than practicality. The taller the pole, the nobler the house. Except for Lord Renfrew, who ordered his banner flown lower to appear closer to the people. He is, of course, deeply unpopular among other nobles for doing so. Nearby, a page boy struggles to attach a folded banner to its crossbeam. You offer to help only to realize it's for the northern clan of Grent, whose sigil of goose-wearing spectacles must always face eastward before unfolding. Why? Because it always has, you're told. You try to rotate the goose. You fail. The goose ends up facing downward. No one speaks for a moment. Then the page boy starts whistling and walks away. More nobles arrive. More banners are inspected. One causes a minor uproar when it's discovered that the family crest has been mistakenly stitched upside down. A rampant stag now appears to be sunbathing. An insult, surely. Or a misunderstanding. Or maybe fashion. Hard to say. To prevent full-scale bickering, the camp's lead bannermaster is summoned. He is a hunched man with a hunched mustache and eyes like dusty doorknobs. He says very little, and when he does speak, it is always in the form of a proverb. He examines the fox banner. Fur folds forward, but never across the eye he intones. The knights nod solemnly. They have no idea what it means, but it seems fair. You're then invited to witness a diplomatic folding, a rare but critical ritual where two allied banners are folded together edge to edge as a sign of unity before a joint campaign. The process takes 45 minutes, involves a chalk diagram, 3 wool blankets, and a live chicken for symbolic balance. The chicken falls asleep halfway through. Everyone takes this as a good omen. The moment ends with a shared toast and a minor accident involving a spilled ink pot. A scribal apprentice attempts to blot the stain with a corner of the banner. Gasps are heard. A priest faints. The apprentice is gently escorted into exile behind the salt wagon. By now, the sun is high enough to bleach the tops of tents. Soldiers begin forming ranks, distracted by their own armor and stale biscuits. You realize all the arguing and folding has delayed actual battle preparation. Still, the banners are finally sorted, creased, stacked, blessed, and ready for unfurling. You watch as a clerk gently records the resolution of the Fox debate in his ledger under the heading, Minor Heraldic Tension Fold Angle Compromised Honor Untarnished. Then he draws a tiny fox in the margin, looking slightly annoyed. The bannermaster's tent smells faintly of beeswax, ink, and burned onions. You duck inside, brushing past a curtain that's clearly been patched with an old tabard, and find yourself surrounded by cloth bundles stacked like loaves of bread. Some are color-coded with bits of ribbon. Others bear wax seals you're sternly warned not to break. In the middle of it all sits a man who appears to be made entirely of wool and size. This is Sir Caldus, retired standard-bearer of 37 years now, the camp's folding specialist and resident guardian of flag spirit. You're his apprentice for the day, which sounds exciting until you realize it mostly involves sorting lint from banner fringe and listening to him mumble about fold memory. Sir Caldus doesn't speak in full sentences, so much as muttered observations like, that corner curls because it remembers the reign of Torquil Vale, or too sharp a crease and the standard won't dream properly. You nod as one does. You're seated on a low bench beside him, handed a battered cloth standard from a long-defunct noble house. The emblem is a squirrel holding a chalice. You don't ask. He gently taps the fabric and hands you a bone folder. Yes, it's literally a tool carved from the thigh of an old warhorse used to press down folds without snapping the wool fibers. You're expected to know this instinctively. Sir Caldus shows you how to wake the thread. This involves whispering into the seam and brushing it lightly with goose down before the first crease. Again, no one explains why. You comply, quietly whispering to the squirrel. He seems grateful. Across the room, another apprentice is struggling with a large crimson flag that refuses to stay folded. Sir Caldus watches with great sadness. That one's been angry since Dunsmuir, he sighs. You have no idea what happened at Dunsmuir, but the banner does look agitated. As the day wears on, your duties grow stranger. You're asked to sniff a bolt of blue silk to determine if it's too damp for loyalty. You test a fold with your chin to check alignment. You're told to encourage the edge when it won't stay down. By mid-afternoon, your back aches. Your hands are full of thread, and you've begun assigning emotional states to cloth. The other apprentices are in similar states of confusion and reverence. One has spent 2 hours trying to untangle a tassel knot without cutting it, because apparently a cut tassel shortens your luck. Another is using a brush made from badger whiskers to dust the border of a banner that has never seen battle but is still treated as sacred due to its proximity to a royal picnic. At one point, Sir Caldus pulls out an ancient folding guide written in Latin with diagrams that seem to contradict each other. Page 5 suggests folding from the bottom up, while page 7 insists on the opposite, unless it's a naval banner, in which case you fold it diagonally into the wind. Historians still debate whether this was deliberate misdirection or just poor proofreading by a monk with allergies. You attempt your first full ceremonial fold. It's the banner of the Order of the Thorned Lantern, which depicts a flame inside a rose. The fold must preserve the flame's shape. The flame must not touch the rose's edge. The rose must face outward, and the entire thing must fit into a saddlebag no wider than a loaf of bread. No pressure. You begin folding, pressing carefully, aligning the edges. Sir Caldus watches motionless like a heron observing fish. At one point, he raises a finger not to stop you, but to adjust a nearby candle. You finish. The banner fits. It holds. The rose and flames sit perfectly aligned at the top, glowing in the afternoon light. He grunts softly. This is, you later learn, the highest praise he's ever given. As a reward, you're allowed to fold one of the old battle flags, the kind that's only used on special days. This one is patched faded and smells strongly of lavender. You fold slowly, carefully smoothing over the embroidered griffin whose tail was once partially eaten by a mule. This banner has seen everything: frostfire celebrations and one unfortunate maypole incident. You handle it like a relic. You don't know its story, but the way it folds, soft, trusting, makes you feel like you were there all along. By now the sunlight is slanting gold through the tent flaps. Sir Caldus begins putting his tools away with the slow, reverent gestures of a priest closing a reliquary. The banners are all stacked in rows. Some are wrapped, some aren't. One is still humming. No one addresses that. As you step outside, your eyes blink against the light. There's a hush across the camp, the kind that comes before anything happens. You carry one of the banners under your arm, folded, weighted just right, pressed like a letter that might never be opened. You pass a soldier who glances at it and nods. "That one'll ride true," he says. You nod back as if you know exactly what that means. Maybe you do. The mist has returned, curling low across the ground like steam off an overcooked stew. It clings to the grass and to the hems of every cloak thick enough that boots vanish into it mid-step. The sun is trying its best, casting a weak, yolk-colored light through the fog. But for now, everything feels suspended in a soft breath of time. And that's when the banners begin to rise. You watch from the edge of camp, hands still tingling slightly from all the folding. Soldiers shuffle into formation, shields clinking gently like distant cutlery. Horses snort. Somewhere someone is loudly regretting last night's lentils. But in the middle of it all, the banners unfurl one by one, some gracefully, some with the hesitant wobble of a sheet on laundry day. Yours is the fourth to rise. It lifts slowly, as if remembering how to be vertical. The folds loosen the fabric size, and there it is. The thorned lantern flame intact, rose petals outstretched like lazy arms. It catches what little breeze there is, fluttering softly, more a polite wave than a call to arms. You glance around. Not all banners have fared as well. One rises backward, another caught mid-unfurl displays only the lower half of a dragon, which gives the unfortunate illusion of a large snake in culottes. The squire responsible is quietly reassigned to soup duty. Another banner belonging to the distant Duchy of Farndle refuses to open at all. Its folds are too tight, too cautious, over-prepared. The fabric has taken on a stubborn personality, fluttering only when no one is looking. Two men try to coax it open by humming. A third pokes it with a ladle. As the lineup continues, you notice the soldiers aren't quite sure where to go. The banners, usually the guideposts of battlefield formation, are facing multiple directions. One is upside down. Another is listing lazily toward the chicken coop. A captain squints at them and shrugs. Close enough. There's no great fanfare, no horns, no call to battle. Just a quiet shuffling of feet, a soft flapping of cloth, and a general sense that everyone's hoping someone else knows what's happening. A knight rides past you, glancing up at the fluttering standards. Is it "Is that supposed to be a lobster?" he mutters, pointing to one of the newer banners. You squint. "It's a griffin," you reply. "Probably." He nods like that's helpful and rides on. Despite the mild chaos, there's something comforting about the moment. The banners, even crumpled or confused, stand. They mark presence, if not purpose. They sway in the breeze like sleepy heads nodding off in church. Even the poorly folded ones, especially those, add to the scene's peculiar charm. You walk the lines now, watching soldiers glance up at their house colors. Some adjust the folds mid-hoist, smoothing creases with armored thumbs. One knight whispers an apology to his banner for forgetting its pole cap. Another kisses the fringe before tucking it under a belt. These aren't grand gestures, just quiet, habitual ones, the small rituals people do when they want to feel like the day might turn out all right. At the far end of the field, you spot two clerics arguing about the correct liturgical direction for banner blessing. East is traditional, but the son's stubbornly refusing to cooperate. They compromise by turning halfway and chanting sideways. The banners, unbothered, ripple approvingly. You pass by Sir Caldus, who's standing perfectly still next to the line of reserve banners, arms folded, eyes closed. You're not sure if he's praying, napping, or just letting the wind tell him secrets. One banner finally collapses its pole, slipping from a poorly secured bracket. It flops to the ground like a deflated cake. Everyone winces. A page rushes to fix it. The flag, once righted, looks vaguely embarrassed. The soldiers are mostly assembled now, waiting, not for battle, not yet, but for something to begin. Orders, maybe, or a blessing, or lunch. They stand beneath their banners like chess pieces, uncertain which game they're in. You return to your post, the thorned lantern standing tall beside you. The folds you pressed this morning have softened into gentle curves. The rose smiles faintly. The flame sways just a bit like it's nodding off. The air holds steady. No thunder. No drums. Just the quiet breath of the field and the lazy flutter of cloth. Someone sneezes. The banners wave. And so they wait. Now, as the mist thickens again and the last light fades from the folds of cloth overhead, you let yourself breathe slower. You're still there in the hushed space between banners and boots where time doesn't quite move, and the breeze smells faintly of wool wax and old stories. Around you, fabric settles into silence. The great standards of houses long forgotten ripple one final time and fall still. Somewhere nearby, a squire yawns. A knight adjusts his cloak and quietly gives up. You lean back on a hay-stuffed sack, feeling the weight of the day in your shoulders and the echo of folds in your hands. The fire nearby crackles just once before settling into a slow burn. No one's in a hurry now. There's nothing to fix, nothing to unfold, just the soft understanding that even the most precisely creased banners will end up wrinkled again tomorrow, and that's fine. You close your eyes. The colors of the banners drift gently behind your eyelids, soft golds, dull reds, the glimmer of embroidery thread half lost in the twilight. They dance a little and then fade like leaves on a slow breeze. And in the distance, a familiar voice. Remember, never fold across the beak. Good night, banner folder. You've done enough.